Hey everybody, Ray here. Would you like to take your television area from something that looks like this to something that looks more like this? If you'd like to see how I did that, stick around and I'll show you. In the first video today, we're going to talk about the floating cabinet that I built. In a separate video, I'll show you how I did those floating shelves. And don't forget, if you like the video, hit that like button for me. It encourages YouTube to share my videos with more people, and I'd appreciate it. Now the floating cabinet piece of this project, I call it a cabinet because it's really kind of like a floating shelf. In fact, it will match the 78-inch long floating shelf that's up toward the ceiling. But this piece is really going to be a cabinet. It's going to have a couple of doors on each side and then two drawers in the middle. So in order to accommodate that, he wants 16 inches on the inside. So we've cut 16 inches of the 1x10. So I've got two 16-inch pieces here that will be the sides of this 78-inch box, and that's where we're going to start. So the first thing we're going to do is to put some pocket holes in the side, on the inside part of this board that will fit inside the cabinet. You've all seen pocket holes being drilled before, but one thing I want to show you when I do this is that I've made this attachment using some PVC pipe that I shrunk on one side and expanded on the other side. So this side fits on the hose to my small vacuum, and this side fits on the outlet port. Because this pocket hole drilling can be really messy, but as you'll see when I use the vacuum doing this, there's hardly any mess at all. We've created our box for our floating cabinet. That box is 78 inches long, it's 17.5 inches deep. The inside depth is 16 inches. And then what we did was took the top and the bottom and we connected them with pocket hole screws to the sides, 4 on the bottom and 4 on the top. That's glued and screwed, so that's a pretty sturdy box as it stands right now. Now what we want to do next is I'm going to use this same 1x10 poplar, and I'm going to have boards that are 1x10, which will be 9.5 inches, and they will open this way. So what I'm going to do next is to cut two 16-inch boards that will be the side of the cabinet here, and then will also be the side of the drawers that will go in here. Okay, so I've actually done two steps here. One is I wanted to cut the side that would make up the side to this cabinet as well as one of the sides to the drawers that will go in here. There will be some slats that will come up and down in the back here, and that's what will be used to anchor it to the wall. So in order to make sure that I had room for those slats, I actually had to indent this piece here by 3/4 of an inch. So if I had to overlap that to hit the studs, I'd be in good shape when I did that. So the next thing I did was to cut out the doors. Now the doors, I'm using the same 1x10 material that I used for the top and the sides here, just to make it simple. It's got a really pretty grain to it, I think. And since this inside board here is 16 inches, I wanted 1/8 of an inch around all my doors and in between my doors. Then what I did was I cut each one of these door panels at 15 3/4 inches. So that left me my 1/8 inch at the top and the bottom, and then I used these spacers to get the 1/8 inch on the sides, in between the doors, and on this side. And then that told me where I'm going to have to mount this sideboard here. After I knew that I had the doors exactly where I wanted them with that 1/8 inch gap all the way around, then what I had to do was to take this sideboard here and make sure that it stayed exactly in position and was square from front to back. So what I did to achieve that was I took a couple of 1x pieces and I clamped them against the edge of the sideboard. And then I took a square and I made sure that from front to back I was square this way. I did that on the top and the bottom. That does two things for me. One, it makes sure that I'm nice and square. Two, these 1x pieces that I've clamped down here, when I screw from this side with my pocket hole screws, sometimes it has a tendency to move the board away where you're screwing. Well, this 1x that's clamped here will help prevent that from moving. So what we'll do now is we'll repeat this same process for those cabinet doors on the other side. Now, as I mentioned, I'm making these cabinets for my son, and he wants this door to be flush with the frame of the cabinet, which means I have to use an inset hinge, which I've never used before. So I approached this with a little bit of fear and trepidation, but I already did it on one set of doors, and it's not as difficult as I thought. First of all, I marked the top of each of these doors so I knew exactly where they would go back into position. So this is the right door on the right-hand side of the cabinet, and this is the top. So the door would be facing this way, and since it's the right-hand door, it would open this way. So that tells me that the hinges have to go on this side of the door. Now the instructions said to place your hinge centered about 1/5 of a way from the top and the bottom of your door. So in my case, that was about 3 1/4 inches. So I simply measured up 3 1/4 inches and drew my mark from the top and the bottom. And then you're supposed to inset it so that the outside edge of it is about 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the door. So I just marked off 1/4 of an inch. And then I took my Forster bit and got the point right on the line for the up and down measurement, and then the outside of it so it would be right on that 1/4 inch measurement. And then I made a mark, and I did that for both places. Now I know that I'm ready to drill my Forster bit to make that indentation for the hinge, and it should be exactly where it needs to go. Perfect. Now that we've got the holes ready to receive the hinges, you'll see they fit down there very nicely. We want to make sure that they're nice and square, and then we want to drill a pilot hole for the screws. I've picked up these self-centering drills. Just got these today. I'll tell you what, these things are fantastic. You just insert them, and it puts that little hole right in the center where it needs to go. I've always struggled with that with hinges. That works great. Now I'm not very confident in my ability to measure and put these inner pieces on the inside of the cabinet exactly where they need to be. So I found a way where I could just slide the inner piece over the outer piece while it's sitting approximately where it needs to be in the cabinet unit. Once I've done that, then now I can come in here with a pencil, position it where I want it, and then mark where I want the screws to be. Now I can take them back off, take my door back out, and drill the holes and screw these pieces in. Now that I have the inside hinges in, it's just a matter of slipping the door hinge over those. Once you've got them in there, then I can put my 1/8 of an inch piece of shim underneath, and I can start tightening up. and the adjustment from here to here. So I can tighten these two screws, and then I can work on how well it sits in the doorway. So you can see that we got our door in here. It is nice and flush, and we kept that 1/8 inch gap around like we planned to do. So that came out pretty well. These inset hinges weren't as difficult as I thought they might be. We've got our doors almost completely installed. I have one more door that's cut and the holes are in it that are ready to receive the hinges. There's one problem. When I went to Lowe's and bought the hinges, I needed 2 hinges per door and I had 4 doors, so I needed 8 hinges. But in my infinite wisdom, I bought 6 hinges. Duh! Don't act like you've never done that. Anyway, we're going to set this aside for now. I'm sure I'll have a trip. I need to go over to Lowe's a little bit later anyway, and I'll pick up those hinges. But meanwhile, we're going to go ahead and start on our drawers. There'll be 4 drawers, one on the top and one on the bottom, right in this area here. So that's what we're going to work on next. Now we're ready to start working on our drawers. And the first thing I had to do was to put a center board in here, because there'll be drawer slides mounted to each one of these on the inside, because there will be 4 drawers. To put this in, I just measured the distance between these two here and then made sure that I centered this board. Well, this was 36 3/4 inches, and I know this is a 3/4 inch board, so half of 36 is 18, so all I had to do was measure 18 inches from side to side, and I knew exactly where this board had to rest. So then I just had to square it up, make sure everything was in good shape, and then I attached it with pocket hole screws. I used 1/2 inch plywood to create the sides for the drawers, and I cut them all down to 6 inches because I wanted all my drawer sides to be 6 inches high. I went over to my miter saw, set up the stop block so I could cut all of the lengths the same and all of the depths the same. I went back over to the table saw because I wanted to cut slots in each one of the drawer sides to be able to slide in a 1/4 inch piece of plywood. I set the width of the cut to be about 1/2 inch, and then I set the depth of the cut to be about 1/4 inch. Once I had one slot in there, I could move my fence over just slightly and cut that slot again. Then it would be wide enough for me to slip in the piece of 1/4 inch plywood. Now once we have all our sides cut and the grooves, you can measure and determine how long you need the base to be that's going to slide into those grooves, which I did here. So I've got my base ready to go, and I'm ready to start gluing up my sides together. And the thing you want to be careful of is just to make sure that everything is lining up nice and flush, and that you've got all your grooves matching up and ready to be put together. Because if you get those grooves off and you go ahead and glue it, you got a problem. Now once you've got your first clamp on there, then you can flip this up and you can put some brad nails in the side. What I always do is, as I'm going along here, I just check to make sure that everything is square. If all your edges are cut well and you've clamped it well, it should be pretty square, at least square enough for these purposes. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and glue this other side on here, and then I'll show you how I slide the bottom in and glue the last piece. Now we're ready for the bottom. Select whichever side is the cleanest, and you want that to be on the inside of the drawer where you'll see it. And if you've measured everything correctly, it should slide right down in those grooves all the way into that bottom piece down there, which it has. And then there should be enough left on the top here that when we put our last piece in, it'll catch that, and it's not going to let that slide around on you too much. So we'll square all this up and flush it all up and pin nail it. So basically, here's your drawer. And I've made sure that it's nice and square as I went through the process here, and it looks good. Put some clamps back on there. We're going to let that dry, and I'm going to go ahead and do a couple more of these. So to install the drawer glides, what I decided was I wanted the bottom of the drawer to be 1/4 of an inch above the bottom surface here. So I put 1/4 of an inch spacer down for that. And then I decided I would go up another 1.5 inches, and that's where I would mount the drawer glide. So I used a 1x2 spacer and put that under the drawer glide. Then the only other thing I had to do was to make sure that I was inset far enough back this way that I could put that 3/4 inch panel in front and it would be inset. So I gave myself 7/8 of an inch to the front here of the drawer glide. Now all I have to do is put a couple of screws in here, and this drawer glide is ready to mount. One thing I will point out, you have to be pretty exact with the measurements of your box. What I found was when I mounted these drawers over here, I was 1/8 of an inch too wide. And so what I had to do was put a little spacer on one side and put the drawer glide against that spacer, and then it worked perfectly. But just bear in mind, if you're putting these drawer glides in, you got to be pretty exact. They don't have a lot of tolerance. Once I had the drawer glides mounted on the inside, then I was able to drop my box in there. And then I'm just sliding the drawer glide out, and you see I've kept this 1/4 inch spacer underneath here. And then I can just draw that out, and I can put a screw on each side. Now once I have those front screws in, I can draw a reference line here to make sure that when I take it out and put the back screws in, it'll stay even to where I want it to be. Now to mount my second drawer, I know that the opening here, up and down here, is 16 inches. So I just made myself an 8-inch block, and I'll put a line all around the side. So I have a reference point that that's where the bottom should begin. Now as I said, if I split this in half, it's 8 inches. So what I did was I just took these little 1-bys and I clamped them in there so they would be 8 inches. So that sort of simulates the bottom of the cabinet, except it's up here. Now from that point, I can use my 1/4 inch spacer, use my 1x2 spacer, and that's exactly where I want my drawer glides to be. All I have to do is measure back here and then mount the both of them. So we designed this unit here without a back to sort of take some of the weight out of the unit. I don't think I need a back. It's going to be up against the wall. There'll be drawers and doors. You're not going to see the back of it anyway. And then what I did was I inset all these inside walls here about 1 inch because I want to hang this using a French cleat system. If you don't know about French cleats, there's a lot of videos out there that do a really good job of explaining it, and I really like a French cleat for hanging heavy things on a wall. Now, one of the reasons for using the French cleat is if I had a back on here or even a strut on the top of the bottom that I wanted to nail to the wall or screw to the wall, I'd have to make sure that I was able to come in this way and hit a stud. What that made me do was to worry about where am I going to put these pieces right here? And if I just wanted them to be equally spaced, which is what I did, would they be in the way of trying to screw to a stud in the wall? Well, the French cleat gets me around that because what I'll do is here's the back plate to the French cleat here. I can put that on the wall first. I can screw this into the studs, not worrying about where these pieces are. And then this piece will be screwed onto here with pocket hole screws, such that when I flip this over and hang it on the wall, I'm just bringing it up and sliding it down, and this will be very securely attached to the 2x4s, and I don't have to worry about where any of these pieces are and if they'll be in my way. To mount the bottom of the French cleat, we can figure that we want the top of our cabinet to be 36 inches high. And then we used a 1x6 to make our cleats, so that's 5.5 inches. So we'll come down 5.5 inches from that. And then we need another 3/4 of an inch because the top of the unit sits on the French cleat. So now we're coming down 6.25 inches. So now we know that we have to mount our French cleat right at that mark right there. Our French cleat system worked out really well. You can see how the top piece here nests into the bottom piece. The bottom piece has 2 screws where every stud is. And then I just put a couple of screws on the top piece after it was nested in there to make sure it would stay good and tight. Our unit wound up being just perfectly level, as you can see by looking at that. So it came together really well for us. Now we're putting the doors back on, and we'll put the drawers in, and then we're going to come back and show you the final product. So our floating shelf came out really well. We were really happy with it. We didn't want any hardware on the outside, so I put the push to open hardware on the inside, and that works great as well. I've never used that before, but it was pretty easy. For the next thing, we're going to put some floating shelves right here above the cabinet. But that's for another video, and I'll reference that right here. I hope you enjoyed this project and found some value in it. If you did, give me that thumbs up if you would, and don't forget to subscribe. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next video.